Welcome back to SeaKeepers Voyages of Discovery. I'm your host, Katie, and today we're diving into the blue world of manta rays as ocean giants and guardians of the sea. Joining us is Lydia Green of Manta Watch New Zealand, a conservation group dedicated to studying and protecting manta populations in Aotearoa. SeaKeepers South Pacific Director Melissa White, a familiar voice if you tuned into Season 1, also pops in to share her insight on her scientific expeditions with Lydia. Together, they offer powerful insights into how research and community-led conservation come together in the protection of these gentle giants. With Lydia guiding the way, we'll explore the ecological importance of manta rays, their cultural role as guardians in Maori tradition, and how Indigenous knowledge and modern science are working hand in hand to protect them. Join us as we journey into their world and uncover why saving these ocean guardians is a mission that connects us all. All right, so I'd love to know a little bit about you and your specific background and what drew you to manta rays in the first place.
So I was born in the middle of the UK. Even from like the early age of 4, I just had such a deep connection. I was so drawn to the ocean to the point that when we used to go on kind of annual trips to the coast, like I just run to the sea or grab onto rocks in rock pools and not let go. And so I've always had just like this really deep connection. And I always known that I wanted to work and be in the ocean as much as possible. And then when I was a little bit older, I got really into sharks and rays and just the natural world generally. Always knew that I wanted to do marine biology before I kind of even knew what that was. And then I did a marine biology degree. And then, like I've just kind of followed the ocean. I was still really into sharks. And so I've done quite a lot of work. Basically, like any species that I've been interested in at the time, I've kind of made a point of getting like firsthand experience through like working with them. Been really fortunate to work in different parts of the world with different species. Mantas kind of found me, I suppose. The first time I saw one, I was doing some thresher shark work in the Philippines, and we were diving on this big seamount. It was kind of like that classic story of like the light from above just got kind of taken out, and then you look up and then you're like, what is that? Yeah, so that was my first kind of like, wow. I don't really know what happened, but that was pretty cool. And then maybe like 7 or 8 years later, through another job, then I started doing a bit of work with the Manta Trust and helping with their Fiji project. So started collecting data and it piqued my interest. And then I started working on the Manta Trust projects. So I was kind of in Mexico at the time with the Mexican Caribbean project. Then I suddenly kind of put all that stuff together, do a lot of work in other fields and marine stuff as well in New Zealand. And then I was like, we could kind of create a project. It was kind of like a slow burn of what kind of falling in love with them, I suppose. They're really interesting animals and there's so much to learn about them. And then we know so very little about them in New Zealand. I think that's a long-winded way of being like, they kind of found me and I got into them.
So it sounds like Manta Watch New Zealand is this big amalgamation of all these different passions. And it's so interesting because you said you found particular love for, certain shark species, and then that's where your research would lead you. So what is it about particular shark species or maybe particular ocean creatures in general where you have these moments where, I need to study them more or understand them more, and you do it on such a specific level?
Yeah, I'm very curious. I really like working out how things do stuff. Overriding want or desire around that stuff is like, I just love swimming with big stuff in the ocean. So I was like, how can I craft a style around that particular desire? Sharks and rays are really incredible. Like they're just perfectly designed for their environments. I mean, I've done a lot of work with great whites as well. And just watching how those animals negotiate their environment and figure stuff out. I think the other side of it is sharks and rays generally have a pretty bad rep. They've had a lot of like negative media, but they're just incredible animals and they're so vital for the marine environment. I want to learn stuff for myself. It sounds like I've always kind of wanted to do that. And you are bombarded with lots of different, I guess, preconceptions or opinions. That's interestingly a big part of like the Manta Watch journey, because my initial feedback when I was like, hey, I want to do this, it had automatically been put into the too hard basket. They were like, no, that population, like it's really hard to study, like you're not going to get anywhere. And that was from experts in the field. And it's very much like, hey, actually, if you start looking and you put effort into certain places, then It's amazing what you can learn and find out.
So when did you start Manta Watch New Zealand and what is its main goal?
I had a full-time job at the time. I was a business owner. So I started as a sneaky manta side hustle to begin with, and that was around 2017. And that was very much starting to bring sightings specifically, like say manta sightings with entry together. So just a little bit of wider context. So I've kind of worked in fisheries and industry and ecotourism, marine education as well. So I'd done all of that stuff within that marine space in New Zealand. And so I knew that we had lots of different sightings from different sources, but yeah, no one was bringing all the information together. So it was very much like, hey, where are we starting? So it was a case of just like going through YouTube. There'd been like one research publication in 2003 saying that, hey, we have them here, but we had very minimal to go on. So then I chipped away at that for a while and then made it into a charitable trust in 2020, started working with bigger research partners, so primarily Conservation International Aotearoa. They're our key research partner that enabled me to grow it relatively quickly. And then I've been on it full time for probably like the last 3 or 4 years. And then we started doing dedicated research like 2020 onwards. In terms of what it actually is, Asiatic manta rays are a globally endangered species. We know very little about them in New Zealand. So this is like the last population that we hardly know anything about them. And so our charitable trust and research project, it's all about learning more about them. We want to know how to protect them in New Zealand and in their wider population range. Another side that I'm really passionate about is using manta as a way of connecting people to the ocean, because we know that mantas use so much of our ocean. We want greater ocean protection through manta ray research. That's kind of the bones of it in a long-winded way.
That's an amazing mission. It sounds so cool. You get to go out and interact with all of these communities that have deep personal connections to the ocean, to manta rays. You know, they're seeing these creatures in the areas where they're living and working. So how can you incorporate the knowledge from all those different communities into active research that would benefit the manta rays?
It's a really positive space to be in. I 1,000% believe that everybody has something to learn from everybody else all the time. There's so much knowledge out there already, and I'm a massive fan of collaboration. They are a really elusive species as well. They hide in plain sight. We have a massive search area, and so it's all about teamwork. I'm very into bringing everyone along on the journey, like, and have collective wins. I mean, through our research, we know that they're breeding here, and we'll no doubt talk about that a little bit later, but they are a treasured species to Aotearoa, our Indigenous communities, as well as Pakeha and just everybody. Like, it's very much everyone can contribute to manta ray research, which ultimately will protect an endangered species, but then, you know, we're hopefully going to get greater ocean gains as well. One of the really beautiful things is being able to give that back to community at the same time, if that makes sense. As I was mentioning before, like some of the challenges was like, hey, it's too hard. And then you start talking to people and, you know, you've got fishers that have been seeing large numbers of manta and devil rays for like the last 20 years, or you talk to Maori, Indigenous peoples, and, you know, they have stories as part of their travel stories to Aotearoa. You know, they followed the whales, the seabirds, and Te Whairahi, the oceanic manta ray, which lines in with the migrations that we've been able to discover through satellite tagging. So it's all part of the same story, and it's very much remembering, building connection, as opposed to like paving a new way. Like, I feel it's more of a supportive role with an intention. So then we can all be better for it and our environment can be better.
I just returned from an expedition in the Galapagos where we were looking for whale sharks. We didn't get to see them, unfortunately, but it was so cool because the researchers just have these really close connections with the fishing communities, all of the ecotourism going on, and everyone just shares all of this knowledge about where these creatures are going and where they're being seen. And it's such a connected network of people just so curious about where they're going. So it sounds very similar and just such a deep connection throughout the whole community there.
It's kind of like one of the wider missions, I suppose. We want people to feel connected to manta, to the ocean, and then if people are connected, then they care about what happens. And that's kind of the wider notion behind it all. It doesn't make sense to try and reinvent the wheel, or it's also about respect, and everyone has their own relationships with ocean, with these animals, and it's very much just like sitting with what we have. It's all really valuable resources, and we can work together. We're going to achieve so much more by working together than trying to do the same thing separately, because we all want the same thing. We want healthy oceans, healthy planet, healthy community. That's what it's all about.
And how do you do that? Are you going into these communities? Are there like small working groups where you're sitting down and chatting with people? Do you bring them out on the water? It seems like a big mission.
It's a life journey, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, the majority of Manta Watch is kind of 90% me at this stage. Like I'm really keen to build capacity. So I guess in terms of education and outreach and general impact, it's been pretty significant, but I want it to be more with the help of the people. I guess one of the biggest ways is I've done a national film tour. So we created a short film around like 21, 22. And that's just a really beautiful way of being like, hey, we have mantas. These are the people that are doing the mahi, so the research, and here's the wider issues, and this is how you can help. And it had a really big citizen science aspect to it. Yeah, I guess a side note on that is over 70% of all of our manta ray sightings data that feeds into our project comes from citizen scientists. So it is like the foundation of it is community. So it's really beautiful to be able to create something, and through story, you can just get so much more across straight away, and people can get that connection straight away. I've screened the film 30 times over the last few years. We have a Q&A with that as well. And then that's just a really beautiful way of just having that nice conversation. And we always get some really beautiful questions, but then, we always get some really decent sightings from that as well. Normally from like some old boys that saw manta like 40 years ago, which is actually like just as important as one from like, say, yesterday. Constantly building that picture of, hey, like they've always been here. We're just putting more effort in to find them. And I do a lot of the screenings. We have an education program that we're hopefully going to launch later this year. So start getting the kids into mantas in the offshore ocean space. We do a lot through socials and then do collaborative events and whatnot. I do a fair bit with iwis. As mentioned, I live on Aotearoa Great Barrier, and so we have Ngāti Rehua Te Waike Aotea here. And so we collaborate quite significantly in the manta research space. My general goal is to build capacity within community as well, because we have manta pretty much everywhere on like northern east coast of the country anyway. So I'm really keen to build capacity within community and within mana whenua, so Indigenous peoples, so they have the skills to be able to research their mantas at place. We essentially become like that umbrella. In terms of like a longer term strategy as well, it's all about succession, and we're wanting that longer term connection for people. There's a few things afoot.
That's amazing. You can be kind of the home base for all of that data going back potentially decades. And even the observational sites just can matter so much now.
It's kind of like cracking the manta code, because they are quite predictable through like the data. The last 5 years, we've been getting out on the water and been able to like get some really high quality data. The citizen science sightings data just provides that beautiful like overview of consistency over time and areas where mantas have been. We've been able to figure out that mantas will be in a certain place at a certain time of year, like through that. It is a big game of hide and seek. Just having that network of people out on the water all the time, when we are able to get out there, we have a really good targeted approach as well. It just helps me figure out what I'm wanting to do with the conditions that we have. It is a real team effort. And then we've been able to achieve so much within the last 4 years, and constantly bringing it back to community, because we really wouldn't have been able to do it without them.
So on that note, you've mentioned citizen science a couple times now. For someone who's maybe never heard of citizen science before, how would you describe that?
It's general public just doing what they do, but it turns out that whatever they're doing is actually quite important, or it's essentially doing a survey or recording data. With regards to, say, Manta Watch, like anyone that's out on the water that encounters a manta ray, they can submit that sighting to the project through a few different means. the key information that we need from them is like the time and the date and the location. So like the GPS mark. So that gives us our verified sightings data. And then moving on from that, observational stuff. So a lot of our data is actually captured with video and imagery. So they can take videos or photos, then I might be able to identify an individual manta, or I'll be able to figure out their behavior or basically what they're doing. We can get a lot of information about that encounter from them taking a mark on their phone and then taking a video or jumping in with a GoPro or something. And as I mentioned, because it is such a massive part of our data collection, as of December last year, I was able to get an app up and running as well. So now it's even easier for people to collect good quality data, and then it's like directed straight to the project. There's a lot of admin around that, and it kind of takes you away from maybe other stuff that you need to put your time into a little bit more. Again, like just utilizing technology and community. Like, I mean, that's kind of like the essence of Manta Watch, really. It's been really good. So yeah, people just casually collecting data, and if they want to have more of an intentional approach, then that's great too.
Yeah. How do you identify an individual manta ray? And are there mantas that you see year after year that you've developed, maybe a personal connection with?
I'd like to develop a personal connection with the manta. Like, that would be very nice. The gold standard for manta ray research is, so we can collect photo IDs. So a photo ID is a clear image of the underside of the manta. Basically, they have spot patterns or splodges. The markings on their bellies are unique to that individual. So if we can get a really good picture of that, then we can catalogue that image. We can do a few things with that. So then we can get an idea of population size over time. But then once the animal is in our database, if we see that again, that same animal, so that's called a resighting, we can glean some information around that. So for example, if we find that manta in two different places, then sussing out where they're moving to. For females, for example, she could be pregnant one year and then maybe pregnant another year, or injuries or growth. It just kind of helps you like dive deeper into that population, and then we can get some really good demographics information. So how that population is actually structured. So for example, here, like we get a lot of females. A lot of those females are pregnant. Straight away we can be like, oh hey, this could be a really important breeding area for manta, which then we can look at in terms of conservation management. If we're getting more information about that, then hey, we might be able to get greater species and potentially site-specific protections like through this information. So yeah, photo IDs are great, and so they're really a lot of the main behavior that we get in New Zealand through our summer periods is feeding. They basically just gorge themselves on krill. And so when they do that, a common behavior, something that's called somersault feeding, and that's where they'll essentially do a backflip and then their belly is in clear shot. Yeah, it's easier to kind of get a photo ID that way. And so easier for us and then easier for assistant scientists. But through our research as well, we've figured out that the markings on their heads are also unique. If we've got two images, then that dorsal, that head ID, will help us like match up historic sightings and whatnot.
Okay, how would you describe a manta ray to someone who's never seen one before?
Well, in Spanish, they loosely translate as blankets.
Interesting.
So they are kind of like a big blanket. They're a flat shark, and they have horn-like appendages off their heads, and they've got big wings, and they're very large. They're generally light on the underside, dark on the top. And then I'd probably go into like some facts just to like pique their interest. So I'd be like, hey, they've got the largest brain of any fish, and they're crazy, crazy intelligent. And you can have like really good interactions with them. All of them have their own personality. They're very fast. They do some really cool acrobatics, like under the water. They can jump out of the water.
It was amazing. I saw my first oceanic manta ray 2 days ago off the coast of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I don't think any of us expected her to be out there. We were doing some shark tagging with Ocean First Institute, and I'm in the water, and all of a sudden someone goes, there's a manta ray. And I see it swimming. It was incredible. But yeah, they are so big and so fast. I did not get to really absorb this creature as much as I wanted to. So hopefully there will be another chance someday, because just really, even from afar, so majestic.
They're their own bag. Because I've done quite a lot of work with reef mantas, so they're smaller
Mm.
manta cousin. Yeah, they just have such a different energy to them. They're kind of high risk, high reward. When you get an interaction with an oceanic, it is fairly next level. Well, it sounds like you've been having a wonderful time. Like, you dropped in Galapagos, you saw an oceanic 2 days ago. Like, it's been like in my little treehouse, like sheltering from a storm.
Oh,
I'm like, hey, I want a bit of your stuff. That sounds pretty cool.
you'll get out there so soon. You have some research trips coming up in the next few days or the next week or so. Is that right?
Hopefully. It's Tongaroa and Hinemoana are deities, Atua for the ocean. If they're in good mood, we will be out. For mantas, we need fine weather. So targeting light winds and minimal swells. Basically, if we can get that water as glassy as possible, then we have the best chance of seeing manta. If we have even like any little mini whitecap situations, so even if the low to moderate breeze, it just makes spotting manta a lot harder. That nicely kind of gets onto our relationship with SeaKeepers. As you mentioned, we've been doing a lot of work with the South Pacific chapter over this last couple of years. And it's just been incredible to get out on bigger boats where we can go further, we can stay out longer. We have a small chance of seeing them as well, because higher up, the better the vantage point as well. It's completely opened up opportunity to get really good data. We've had some massive days through SeaKeepers, just getting that extra capacity. As I'm sure people can appreciate, anything to do with the ocean's really hard and expensive. I work with the weather and animals, and that's two things that you're told from an early age you shouldn't do. Well, you can, but you just have to be very relaxed about it. Perpetually vague. You're always just staring at the weather forecast. So we're hopefully going to have a couple of trips in partnership with the SeaKeepers soon. Once the storm goes down, fingers crossed we can find some manta. I'd be very excited about.
That would be so exciting. What does a typical day on field research look like for you? Are you scanning the horizon from sunrise to sunset? Is that kind of how that works?
It was important for me to choose an animal that fits in nicely with my lifestyle. So they generally like a later day. I'm a morning person, but yeah, it is very heavy on the eyes. So you don't want to be staring hard out. I know that some of my fellow cetaceans, so like whale and dolphin researchers, they'll be staring 15 hours a day and then they'll be listening all night through acoustic. We've learned through our research that mantas like to bask, and like the afternoon is kind of like the sweet spot. They're around in the morning, but they're more active, or in terms of their feeding behavior, it's generally later in the day, and that's the best chance for us to find them because they're actually breaking the surface. They can be real tricky in the sense that they'll just hang and not break the surface at all. Usually, so say if we're going out for a day trip from the island, for example, would we kind of get out into territory around like 11ish? Yeah, we'd be going to like key areas. So through the data that we've learned, I'll have a good idea of the areas that I want to survey through. And that's very much going relatively slowly and staring, basically, looking for anything. We use what we call bioindicators as well. So feeding activity of other species. We have resident whale populations here, the Brutus whale. If they're feeding on the surface, it gives me a really clear indication that the food source for manta is also at the surface, which is great. Certain types of seabirds, so shearwaters, for example, any kind of activity or schooling fish. So yeah, we kind of poke our nose out, and I do have a bit of a manta tingle as well of where I want to go.
I love that.
And thank you. It works. Like, so if we're out there and it's really dead in an area or like quite quiet, it's very much adaptive intuition as well. Sometimes I'll throw a drone up and just have a bit of a scan somewhere when the area is really good and the water's, we're kind of targeting blue warm water. Again, that's kind of my preference. Yeah, so we'll do drone survey, and then if we find one or two or whatever, then we'll shoot our drone up. So a lot of our work is done completely passively. So if they're feeding, then we can get the drone up. We can start recording, and then so I can get a dorsal ID, so a really nice clear image of like the head. And then if they're feeding, then we can get, the aim is to get the ID shot. And then we'll get lots of biological data through the drone. And then depending on the team, so who's on board at the time, then if we can, then we'll try and get in, especially with females, because we might not know if they're pregnant or not through the drone. You kind of need to get at that level with them. And that's a really important piece of information to get. As I mentioned, I just want to be in the water all the time. So if I can be, then I will. If my colleague Mark is around, then we'll do some satellite tagging. And the way that that's set up is I'll be on the drone. So we'll have already got a lot of information about the manta, but then the drone will be used as basically a guide for him. We hover it directly over the animal. And so then he slides off the boat with his tag. So we use a pole spear, and then that's attached to a satellite tag. We also use underwater scooters as well, because as we've mentioned, mantas are really fast. So like the first year we did it without scooter and the cardio was like too intense. It's all about scooters for us. So yeah, he'll have a scooter, he'll have his tag. We'll basically position the boat so that he can drop in to the front of the manta so the manta can have a look at him. If you drop in towards like the back or like that back quarter, that's like their danger zone, their blind spot. And so they're more likely to freak out. And because they are intelligent and inquisitive, they want to see you and they can be like, hey, what's that? He basically gets close, he'll tag, and then we'll come back in and I'll be recording that as well. So that's another key part of the research that we do.
So after the at-sea research that you all have done with tracking and tagging and the decades of citizen science observations, in general, what do you think is going on with the manta ray populations around New Zealand?
Through the satellite tagging work, specifically, we've been able to confirm that we have like regional connectivity. So mantas that are in the Hauraki Gulf, so the area that I mainly work in, like you'll find those in different areas along the coastline. So they're using that whole area. So that was one thing that we've learned. The bigger discovery, we just weren't sure whether they were here all the time or if they moved away. And so we've been able to track them into the wider southwestern Pacific towards Fiji, to Tonga, Nukau. We even had one that went all the way to Bali. So these are like, they're actually migrating like thousands of kilometers twice a year, which is pretty wild. And so in terms of, again, like looking at that conservation management situation, so they're a protected species in Aotearoa. As soon as they leave New Zealand waters, then they leave behind their protections. And so then we're looking at a really awesome migratory corridor into the wider southwestern Pacific, and then also like the wider threats that means for manta. So basically what we've been able to figure out is at least part of the population migrate. We're not sure if all of them migrate. As I mentioned, we have a lot of heavily pregnant females here. We're on the thinking that if they're giving birth here, which we're fairly confident that at least some of them will be, those babies aren't likely to do the migration straight away. So they're probably going to be, yeah, I mean, the manta babies are under 2 meters, so they're still pretty big, but wow, they're very vulnerable compared to average disc width, so like tip to tip. But our population here is generally between 4.5 to 6.5 meters across, which is massive.
Yeah. 6.5 meters across.
Yeah, well, they can get up to like 7.
Oh my God.
The biggest one I've seen is 6.2, and she was massive, absolutely massive. So then that kind of brings in, hey, do we have nursery areas? Yeah. And we've also, through the tracking data, we have managed to get that proof of return migration. So they essentially gorge super hard, pop out a baby, maybe just get lots of weight on, like from feeding in our productive waters. Then they'll leave for a few months and then they'll come back and then do the same again. It's also part of that wider story of, there's other animals that do that. So, our cetaceans, seabirds, other sharks, we have a lot of threatened species that are moving through those waters. And so it's a really exciting space now because we can add that manta lens onto that and be like, hey, we have this globally endangered species here. Let's use that to build that wider protection. So that's we're looking at getting greater protection in New Zealand, which, spoiler alert, we've just managed to get the threat classification upgraded in New Zealand to nationally vulnerable. That's all through the mahi. So that's been awesome.
Amazing.
And then now we're looking at, hey, I'm thinking bigger. let's start moving into like that Southwestern Pacific space. Let's start surveying in those areas. And we want to know what they're doing there. And we want to know what the fisheries impacts are doing there. We just want to get a real feel. And then through our mahi community, the researchers, governments, if we can kind of get that whole space, that whole high seas area between Aotearoa and then the wider Pacific Islands deemed will have more protection there for these animals, that ocean as a whole, then that's the vibe now.
I'm really curious, after learning that some of these creatures reach 6.5 meters and they seem kind of like gentle giants. They're beautiful, they're filter feeders, they're very intuitive, very intelligent. What are some of the threats that they're facing in New Zealand and around the world?
Yeah, so a big part of our research here. So I just mentioned that the threat classification status, we've just got that upgraded to nationally threatened, but it was data deficient. And so that basically means that in Aotearoa anyway, like the biggest threat to New Zealand mantas is that we just didn't know enough about them. We don't know what's happening.
Quick surprise from Melissa, who's able to pop on. Hi, Melissa.
Oh, hi, Mel. How are you?
I didn't interrupt, but I wanted to quickly pop on after my last meeting ended just to see how things were going.
I think they're going pretty well.
Yeah, I'm so glad you could join. I thought it would be great to have Melissa hop on if she had time to just maybe also share some insights from her work with you and with the manta population. So we're just chatting right now about some of the threats that mantas face.
Yeah, so in New Zealand generally, we just didn't know. So that's a big part of our research, kind of getting more information about the threats. Natural predators would be large predatory sharks, orca, of course, killer whales. But the big thing with manta is that they can't swim backwards. And so entanglement and fisheries is a big thing. Not so much in New Zealand, but then globally, the main reason that the classification is globally endangered is through fisheries and bycatch as well. Looking into that wider South Pacific, yeah, we're not sure what that impact is for the species.
So we have our South Pacific Director, Melissa White, hop on for a minute, and she has been working with Manta Watch New Zealand for a while, doing some of the scientist-led expeditions. I know you guys have a really great collaboration. So, Melissa, I'm so curious what manta rays mean to you personally and what some of these opportunities of going out and getting to observe them in the field have done for you in your connection with the ocean.
So I've actually had a lot of experience with manta rays in the past, just with the diving I've done around the world, and I've been really fortunate to get to swim with mantas quite often. But oceanic manta rays were actually really new to me. Most of all the manta encounters I had were reef mantas, which are still absolutely beautiful creatures. In my mind, they're still humongous, but these oceanic mantas were on another level. What Lydia likes to call them as kind of almost like the gateway drug into some sea life. A lot of our discovery yachts that we work with, she's like, this is the gateway. Like these mantas are the gateway because once you have your first encounter with them, you're completely hooked, addicted. We'll go on one expedition with a vessel and wait, can we do another one? We want to keep doing more because such a special experience. And then when you actually get a chance to get in the water with them and then you realize how massive they are, I don't know, they're just these calm, gentle, beautiful creatures. And you just, when you're that close to them, you just feel this connection to them. And so I've been very fortunate that, again, most of the vessels that we have around here will snatch up the opportunity to get to do a manta expedition. It's very weather dependent. So a lot of times what holds us back is either the weather or Lydia's time. She's a very busy woman as well. But we definitely don't have a shortage of vessels that want to participate. So we're really fortunate with that. And again, I get to participate and help Lydia when we're on those expeditions. And as cold as the water is here in New Zealand, probably the only thing that really will get me in the water is getting to get in with mantas to the point where I'll go hypothermic. So
it's not that cold.
For a tropical island girl, yes, it is.
It sounds like such a special community in New Zealand around mantas. And I'm curious, Melissa, what you think is kind of the reason behind that special connection. There's a lot of reasons why certain communities would be connected to certain species. And I'm curious about what it is for New Zealand in particular.
One thing is a lot of New Zealanders don't even know that they exist here. I think that's always a shock to them. And I think once they know that they're here and they see what a manta ray is, or if they do get their first encounter with it, that's how you have that instant connection to it. And you just realize like this is a really special moment. It doesn't happen that often. Like to have that encounter especially here in New Zealand in your backyard, is really special. So maybe that's, has something to do with that connection, is that it's, you feel really blessed anytime you get the opportunity to encounter them.
And Lydia, what do you think is the reason the Indigenous communities from New Zealand have such a special connection to manta rays, who they sometimes see as guardians of the ocean?
Te whairahi, oceanic manta ray, they're seen as a Tonga species, so they're treasured. They do have cultural significance. So in terms of their wider story, their songs, their waiata, their korero, their story, their general stories through time, manta have got a place. That connection, or not necessarily the connection, but some of those stories have been lost over time and then replaced with other rays. So for example, the voyage out of the Southwestern Pacific down to Aotearoa, so the general thinking is, they follow the stars and then the whales and the seabirds. But then with closer conversations, it's like, oh, hey, followed the manta as well. And then as soon as Māori settled into Aotearoa, the exposure to whai got less because they weren't voyaging. And so they weren't doing that migratory pathway. And so then it actually kind of changed into whairepo, so like eagle rays and stingrays. It's not my story to tell at all. I see our job as supporting that connection and that remembering. And so we do that through incorporating, just like knowledge share, basically, and then providing opportunity. Something that I'm really excited about, which we'll hopefully do next year, is having trips with the Matua and Kua, so our elders, as well as rangatahi, so our youth. We're able to use the knowledge that we've learned through our work and through collaboration with SeaKeepers to re-establish those connections for our Indigenous communities, and that means a lot to me.
Yeah, that's really special. Will the two of you be going out on the water together soon?
We're just waiting for Cyclone Tam to move off. It's a really interesting time of year now for us. So we've moved out of the peak manta season, and so we're into the shoulder. And so as we were talking before in terms of migration, we know that the mantas have left, but we don't know how many have left or like that proportion of the population. And so for us, it's really important to maintain survey effort through like the entire season if we can. And so generally we're kind of lacking on that like spring and autumn survey efforts. So it kind of makes it even more important that we can get out now and see if we can find mantas still. And also for me, like seeing what the water's doing, I'm kind of excited because this big tropical system will have essentially pushed a lot of that tropical water back down, because this time of year it starts receding and it gets colder and I get sad. Mel gets really sad. But yeah, so I'm hoping like Tam has just pushed it all down, and then we'll just have like a massive manta and whale shark fest in blue water that's probably going to be, if realistically, maybe 21, but we might get 22 degrees Celsius. I don't know that in Fahrenheit. Sorry for international listeners.
22 is doable for me. That's when I get in the water. Once it goes like below 22 is when I have a hard time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're hoping for good weather soon.
We do have a couple of Discovery yachts that are on standby. They're waiting to do their next expedition. So we're just waiting for the weather to pass. We'll be out on the water, hopefully.
Now, what do you both hope for the future of manta rays, and what do you think we need to do as a global community to ensure they have a safe future?
For me, or for our project, manta's an indicator of a healthy ocean. As mentioned, they eat krill, so that's zooplankton, and that's one of the key foundation of ocean health. Like everything depends on that. Through protecting manta, we can get wider ocean protections. And so all of those ocean processes can hopefully get a lot more support. And then through like that connection for people as well. My thing is protecting mantas, but through that manta protection, healthy, thriving ocean, healthy, thriving community.
What about you?
Nothing too big.
Yeah, like this on the SeaKeepers side, I would love to continue working with Lydia. One, just spread awareness of mantas, using our connections within the, boating community, letting them know, hey, they're out there. Hey, report what you're seeing, protect them. And then continuing to get them out on the water as often as they can to get the data that they need to keep protecting them.
That sounds like a great plan.
Many more field expeditions to come.
And also, I think this next year we'll focus on our Manta Watch beer tour. That's what we're
Yeah, we didn't quite get that sorted last time. Like we mentioned before, in terms of connecting communities. So December last year, we had a really cool collaboration with a local brewery on the island. And so we had seasonal manta beer. So it was a nori pilsner, so a seaweed pilsner. And that was a great way of raising awareness. That was kind of like the mini scoping project. And I can say it was highly successful. And so now we want to bridge it out we want to get New Zealand hooked on manta beer. And then again, that's just another way of starting that connection and telling a little bit of the story.
What a fun, creative way to get people involved, even if it's just saying like, hey, here's a new species maybe you've never heard of, or for the locals just to feel even more connected. That's really cool.
Imagine you went into like a brewery and they had a, special edition manta beer. I mean, wouldn't you just go straight for that?
I would freak out. I homebrew, and that sounds incredible. I love, especially when, there's a purpose behind it. And SeaKeepers has partnered with like some breweries in the past. And it's always really cool to see people eager to share some sort of message and contribute to a bigger picture.
Yeah. And then, you can have a little bit of like information card as well. And what we normally do is, like a small proportion of that sale will go straight back into the research as well. So it's just one of those really nice collaborations. Yeah, it's all about thinking outside the box with conservation. As I say, like bringing people along the journey as well at the same time.
I love that. It's so interdisciplinary. And I think you both through this collaboration have done such a great job of bringing in different communities and sharing that. So I'd love to promote the video you mentioned that you've done with Manta Watch New Zealand. We'll share that across our platforms and hopefully just be out so much more on the water with you all.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed having a chat with you.
Oh, this was amazing. Thank you. And thanks, Melissa, for jumping on. That was really fun.
Thanks for letting me say that.
Lydia, is there anything else you might want to add, or like any shout outs, any like fundraisers, just anything you might want to add in?
Yeah, check us out. You can find us on socials. So Manta Watch New Zealand, that's kind of our tag. We fortunately have the monopoly of manta rays in New Zealand. So if you type Manta New Zealand, then we'll pop up. So yeah, check us out. And as Melissa was saying, just spread the word. The biggest challenge is that so many people still don't know that we have manta in New Zealand. People can contribute in various ways. We're a small charity. So yeah, just get in touch. Spread the word, really.
And did you mention the app that you have, your new app?
Yes. And if you're in New Zealand and you have a boat, please download the app. It's free to download. It's compatible with all devices. We'll be putting updates on there. That's going to be one of our main comms channels moving forward. We'll get it next year so people can actually do their own manta ray survey through the app as well. So then we can record their survey data and whatnot. Thanks, Mel. That was a key one.
That's great. I'm sure we'll promote that throughout SeaKeepers channels and on our website as well.
And the short film is on our YouTube channel now, so it's publicly available, so people can have a good look.
That sounds amazing. It's Friday night, so I think I'll go grab a beer and watch your documentary and learn some more about manta rays.
Perfect. It's a couple of years out of date now. Bear that in mind. The main thing that I like to tell people is I've got way better at finding manta rays now.
Oh, I love that. You're so attuned to the ecosystems and just so all the intricacies of the ocean ecosystems. It's really cool.
As much as a human can be, so probably not that much, but yeah. But yeah, have a beer, watch the film. It sounds like a great evening. It's 9 a.m. here now, so I'm probably going to have a coffee.
Good. Oh, yeah. Enjoy your weekend. Oh, my gosh. Thank you for doing this on a Saturday.
Not at all. I was just worried that it was either do it at the end of the storm or because the weather's getting good and I might not be around. So yeah, it worked out perfect.
Good. Well, fingers crossed for mantas. Thanks for making this work. And best of luck through the cyclone. I'm hoping for nice sunny days soon.
Lovely to meet you. Great to see you, Mel. And yeah, have a beautiful rest of the time.
Thanks, you both. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of SeaKeepers Voyages of Discovery. Join us next time as we descend into the mysterious world of the deep sea with best-selling author Susan Casey and legendary explorer Dr. Don Wright. Until then, fair winds and following seas.